Okay, so what we got here is a high quality picture of a tear piece of paper. One side's black and white, and another one I've got. This one here is another high quality free tear, and it's got a really nice edge to it. You have to get quite close before it starts. You can actually see the pixels. I think both of these are about 2,000 pixels wide, which is a pretty good size. What I've got here are some pictures of a blues guitarist, B.B. King. And what I'm going to have is some of these sort of like coming out and ripping around his picture now. Okay? So this is going to be my background because I want the rips to sort of like be on this. So this is the document I'm going to be working on. So we'll just leave that one for now. I'm going to start with this black and white one. So I'm going to, once you find a good tear, you can use it a couple of times. So depending on where you take it as well. So here we have an older picture of him when he's a younger man. Actually, I might take this one when he's really young and tear that. So I'm going to Control A or Command A, cut it out, get rid of that document, and put it into this paper one now. And that size is okay. If I press F7, I'll be able to see my layers. I'm going to decrease the opacity a little bit so I can see where that tear is going to be. I don't want to rip them right in, and I don't think ripping the guitar is going to make much sense, but I could rip a little bit of that, kind of like so. So this is the reason why you really want a black and white tear that's very obvious, because when you do something like Magic Wand Tool, or even oh yeah, I'll start with Magic Wand Tool. So if I'm on this layer, the background, I can do that, and it's selected all the black nicely straight away, and it's got that very definite tear going down. Now it would be very easy for me to just go cut and to remove the black, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to change to this layer, layer 1, and I'm going to cut that. And what's happened is that it's taken the shape of where the black is, but instead of cutting it on the black, I'm cutting it on layer 1, which is slightly opaque, but I can move it back up to this, and it's taken that shape, and now I'm going to go cut. Now I can move this around, it's got a nice natural tear to it. Okay? Now what you could do now as well is you could double click on this layer, and you can add a shadow to it. And you can make the shadow come away from it, bring it down a little bit. The distance is probably a little bit irrational, but a bit like that, and it looks like a real tear, or it should be once we get a little bit closer to it. Okay? Okay, let's just zoom on in, and we can see that the tear there now looks like it's a piece of paper that's been ripped. Okay? You won't see it if it's on top of black. Oh, I just realized there's a little bit of speck there, but it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go into this one. Ooh, where is it? Here. And I'm going to have this on one side of the composition all the way to there. And I can move it back a little bit. So there's a little bit of a tear. And as you can see, that shadow is still being affected, still coming onto the area. I might change it slightly just to make it a bit more obvious. You can play with the darkness of the shadow. Okay. The direction of it. So you see that's a little bit too dark. So I can decrease it a little bit. So it follows it quite well. So you can see what I'm doing here. So let's double click on the layer. Okay, so that's one little tear. Now let's do the another one on the other side. I might do actually probably better to do this one. So I'm going to cut this one out. I'm also going to do this on the tear. Let's zoom out. I don't need to use this layer off. I'm going to turn that off. Whoa, it's a big picture. That's okay. So I'll decrease it down, and now I want to cut that side of it. So I'm selecting the other side. Now there's two ways you could do this. You could either select the, well, it doesn't really matter. This is why this is layer so great. So I'm not going to turn it off. I'm going to turn the opacity down a little bit, working out where that cut's going to be. So again, it's going to come close to cutting off a little bit of his elbow, but not too much. And this time instead, I'm going to select white. I have to make sure that I'm on the right layer. So layer 0 is what my aim is to select. and I'm going to select the white. But another way of doing that, turn this off, is just to use the magic wand tool and select everything that's white. You get the same effect in most cases. And then go to layer 2, that's the one we're actually cutting, and cut that. Okay. Now my layer 2, with the opacity, has got a tear on it as well. And I can put that one back into here. Oops, this one. And I can increase the size of that, and that's going to be another side of it. Now this one, there's no point in adding a shadow here because the shadow is going from the left to the right. So if this was a piece of paper, it wouldn't have it. Okay, I might move that up a bit. I can't make it weird. It seems a bit odd to have his face. Okay, you get the idea. All right. Now, what else have we got? We've got this one. And this one, the reason I kept this one is that this is good because a lot of the information is at the top of the photograph. He's holding the guitar really high. He's looking upwards. So, like, it's that kind of information that's that kind of information I want at the bottom now. But I'm going to use the yellow one. So I'm going to, even though it was really useful having that paper tear, which I'll add to the description, it's actually this one, which I'm also going to add to the description, that we really want to work on. Okay, here we go. So we've got the document, and we're really working at putting everything on. This picture and the yellow. So the thing I really like about this tear is that when you rip a piece of paper, you sometimes have the top layer of the paper coming out, and that's really cool. So what I want to do now is something a little bit tricky, but it's not too bad. I'm going to go to image canvas size, and I'm actually going to increase the size of it. The height, I'm going to increase it by 200%. So let's look at what that did. So now we've got a lot more space up here, and I'm going to fill that with white. Now that should basically be seamless, although I can tell it's not completely. So one more fill of white, and it's going to do the trick. Now it's completely white the whole way through. A good way to check that is to inverse it, to turn it into its opposite color. So white goes to black, yellow goes to blue, goes to the opposite side of the color wheel. So now we've got a long piece of white paper, and then it meets that yellow. Actually, I want it the other way around, so I'm just going to rotate this 180. And it's this edge that I really want to talk about. I don't need this top bit, although that certainly could have been used as well. But it's this bottom edge that we're all about. Now, a couple of different ways you could do this. There's always a couple of different ways to do it. So you could go selecting the color, the magic wand, and you could slowly get closer and closer and closer to the edge. That might take a couple of clicks, but I think I've actually done it there. It's got a slight yellow tinge to it, but I'm not bothered with that kind of stuff usually. Alternatively, you could go select color range, and you could select everything that's white, but also, most importantly, get that kind of gray, which is why I selected in the first place. And I won't select any yellow. Make sure that you're going on sample colors, okay? And if that's what you want to keep, you can go select, and you can select inverse. So now it's going to select everything that isn't that. And let's have a look at how much clearer that is. And I think that's a little bit clearer, actually. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this image, we're going to, cut that up, paste it into here. Again, it's a very large image. It's larger than the high quality tear. And there's a lot of, I think I can make the image as large as possible, really. So I really want it to fill that bottom space. Now let's decrease the opacity a bit so we can see what we're actually going to rip off. So I might rip off a tiny bit of the hair and a tiny bit of the guitar, but I think that's any more than that and it's too much. Okay, so that opacity is low. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, just like I did the other times, is I can do lots of different things. So because I'm on this layer, interestingly enough, you can see little layers coming in, so it actually looks like I'm in the guitar, but I didn't need to do that, but it's interesting anyway. What I meant to do, was to go into this layer and select everything that's white. And so very, very quickly that came through, selecting that. Now, here's the thing, it's not just the shape we want to do today, but also a little bit of that texture. So it's very easy to say, like the inverse, cut it off. Oh, sorry, cut it off here, and there's our tear. But it's a little bit more than that. What I want to do is something a little bit more tricky because this looks cool, that's fine, and we could certainly add a shadow to that. Oh, sorry, not stroke, a shadow, and we could have it going upwards instead. Although that's a slightly different sort of like mode. But instead what I want to do is I want to bring in a little bit of this layer. So this is a little bit more complex. So let's zoom in. So this is the area that we want to really look at, just here. What we're going to do is we're going to add a mask to these. So down here there's some little funny buttons like effects that you can do, obviously, that we've already talked about. But here's a masking tool. And what a masking tool does is that it lets through or doesn't let through a little bit of the layer beneath. So if we go to a brush and we've only got choice of black or white, what's going to happen is that I can paint on black in here and it lets a little bit of that texture through, a little bit of that tear. Okay. So if I zoom out a little bit, it might be a bit more obvious what I'm kind of like doing. But that's only with quite a soft one. Let me do it with quite a hard and obvious one. And you can see that tear that we had before. So in other words, what we're doing is we're trying to let through that slight texture there. So there's a myriad of ways you can do it. So this opacity is really low, and the opacity, if we turn it up full, you can see that that texture is coming through. But you obviously don't want to do that because that kind of just defeats the whole purpose, right? So although I will say that this is good because now we can see those two tones of the paper tear. But what we really want to do is like just come back quite a bit. I reckon 80% is usually a good sort of like flow for brushes and a bit of a softer brush. We're just going to tap around the edges a little bit. And that can have a really profound effect, especially if you choose certain areas to like have a little bit more of a burn and distortion to it than others. Okay. And if you forget where those really cool textures are, you can always just look back in here. So obviously around here, I'm going to remember that. It's just in front of his nose, has some more texture around there. Okay. Then when you're happy with it, you kind of have to keep those two layers together. So you might actually merge down and then bring that into this one here. Okay, and then that's got a nice sort of like burn to it as well. You can bring this one down. Okay, and so that's a very simple way of like bringing in those different areas and elements. You might arrange your composition a lot differently than I have. Obviously, this is quite systematic and straight and horizontal and vertical and kind of boring compared to what I think that you'll want to do, but it gives you the idea of how to do that. Okay, great.